Be attentive, my child. You must hear some things, which you have never learned, never sufficiently understood. Learn once and for all of my heart, and remember what obedience is. Lo! From this moment, even to my latest sigh, obedience is my food, my life. Observe intently and devotedly my example. Consider the dispositions of my heart. Behold, if they put me in a rough manger, I remain contented there. If they lift me in their arms, I am content to be carried. Wherever they place me, there I stay contented. Whatever be the wish of those whom my heavenly Father has given authority over me, that do I will. Likewise, I have no other will than to will or not to will that which they will. Neither does my heart ask why they will me here or there. The judgment of the authority that wills is the judgment of myself, who obeys. Thus, my child, did I, the all-knowing and all-powerful Lord, subject myself most humbly to creatures, that you, weak in understanding and will, may learn to submit yourself to them that hold my place in your regard. Be, therefore, obedient to them with a humble heart in all things where they have authority over you, whether it be in temporal or in spiritual matters. For all power is from God. Therefore, my child, when you obey your superiors, you obey me. For you are obedient and submissive to the authority communicated to them by me. If a superior be devoid of virtue and good qualities, this is no reason why you should not obey him the less. For he does not, on that account, the less possess my authority and hold my place. Whenever he enjoins things which are not evidently opposed to me, heed and perform whatever he may say, but you are not obliged to follow him in his doings. Be not concerned, my child, about the qualifications of the one that commands, but attend to that which is commanded, and perform it faithfully, as if commanded by myself. Let the superior be whatever he may, let him act through this motive or that. What does it matter to you? Follow me, seek to imitate my heart, my will, and do not be troubled or uneasy about the rest. The simple performance of another's will is not the virtue of obedience. Do not irrational creatures do so? Even more, even machines, made by the hand of man? It is necessary, when you do the will of the superior, to be willing to perform, with a submissive heart, that which he wishes you to do, that hence, you may cheerfully carry out my will, made known, through the superior. For, although it may happen, that the superior does command through ill will or passion, it is yet my will, that, when no evil is commanded, you perform, with a good heart, what the superior requires. For the rest, I will judge the motive of the superior, who commands, and of the inferior, who obeys, and render to each one that which is just. My child, do not imitate them, who, deceiving themselves, endeavor, by direct or indirect means, to bring over the superior to their own will. These, although, in this manner, they have the will and consent of the superior, do not fulfill my will, but their own, nor do they practice the virtue of obedience, but they obey self-love, nor are they guided by me, but by themselves. In order that the virtue of obedience be perfect, it is necessary that, believing that whatever I require of you, through obedience, is justly demanded, you submit also your understanding, or judgment, to my divine authority, represented in the person of the superior. The less you shall see the reason of the things which are demanded of you, and the more inconsistent that which is enjoined shall appear to your manner of judging, so much the nobler shall be your obedience, and so much the more merit shall you have, if you submit your understanding, and fulfill with a good will what is commanded. Cast aside, therefore, without examination, whatever the pride of reason, or the repugnance of sense, may object, in the sincere belief that my divine will, made known to you, through the superior, rests upon the best, and most certain motives, although you yourself, do not see them. It happens frequently, that the inferior does not see, and that the superior does not know, the true reasons for which, by the superior's command, I desire such, or such, other things to be done, by the inferior. Both are not rarely unconscious instruments in the fulfillment of my secret designs. If you are humble of heart, and burning with love for me, it would not be hard, or difficult, to abandon, for my sake, your judgment and will, and it would be most consoling, and sweet to have your weak understanding, guided by my infinite wisdom, and your will, prone to evil, conformed, to my divine will, the rule of all good. A great thing is obedience, a sublime virtue, whereby, a person overcomes himself, and so dedicates himself, wholly to me, that he retains for himself, nothing of his own, but offers himself, entirely to me, as a holocaust. Do I desire other sacrifices without this one? Do I not rather, require that I be obeyed? Better is obedience, than a victim. Who is stronger than the obedient man? The obedient man shall speak triumphantly, shall triumph, under all circumstances. For he aims to do nothing, except the accomplishment of the divine will, which he always secures. What is there, my child, which the obedient man does not do? He does everything. When commanded, he brings to a favorable issue many and great things, whilst the disobedient loses courage and fails. Nothing is safer or more secure than obedience. The obedient person is never lost, nor does he perish, who submits his will and judgment to authority. But he that disobeys, he that follows his own judgment and will, to the neglect of authority, he is generally lost, and perishes. The obedient man, certain of the reward of his actions, shall not even be held to an account. They that are placed over him, and direct him, shall be obliged to give the account. Lastly, my child, so necessary is obedience, that no works, howsoever good they may be otherwise, if contrary to obedience, can be pleasing to me, nor can they acquire for you any merits. There is no state, no condition, no person on earth, that is not bound to obey. Without obedience, the order which God, who loves order necessarily, has established, could not be preserved. Wherever you may be placed by obedience, be assured that you could nowhere be better, and that you can do nothing more pleasing to me, and more useful to yourself, than that which is enjoined by obedience. Blessed are the obedient. They hasten on toward heaven, with true liberty, in great peace, in permanent security. But the disobedient groan beneath the galling tyranny of their own will. They enjoy no rest of heart. Through a wearisome road, they wander toward perdition. My child, where is one wont to arise the difficulty in obeying? Is it not from this, that you regard a person of the superior, his qualifications, his manner of acting, or his motives for commanding? That you consider not, in singleness of faith, as you should the divine authority, and will alone? Such an example, my child, I did not give. Such was not the disposition of my heart. Although I was wiser and better than all the mortals who exercised authority over me, yet I was heartily submissive to them, without considering the persons, or their qualifications, without judging the motives which made them act, or command. More than this, I did willingly and faithfully obey, as if it were the manifestation of my Father's will, the command of Caesar Augustus, a pagan, who issued his decree with an evil-minded will, and, by complying with this order, I did really do my Father's will, that I should be born in the city of Bethlehem, as the prophets, inspired by the Holy Ghost, had foretold. Observe my whole life, you will find it frequently distinguished by similar deeds. Look, then, my child, and act according to the example which my heart has given you. If you do this, you will find obedience easy, sweet, and full of consolation. My child, you ought to be so disposed, as not to stop at the things which you perceive by the senses, but so as to go forward, even into my very heart. Attend then, and consider how mortified is my heart. I knew well that I was not at all bound by the law of circumcision, that, by complying, I should be reckoned among sinners, made low before men, that my body should undergo sufferings, and my soul debasement, but my heart, moved by the divine will, enkindled by love, as with a living flame, overcame all this. Understand, my child, the inner sentiments of my heart, and be mindful of putting on the same. All things were well ordered in my heart. There is nothing inordinate in my whole humanity. Yet, I did never act from a mere inclination of my human nature. This, I either overcame, or passed by, and in all things, even those which were natural, I acted ever from a supernatural principle. Whether the things to be done or undergone were pleasing or displeasing to the feelings of human nature, this was never the cause or reason why I did either embrace or shun them. I was ever moved by the divine will to do and suffer with a willing heart all things that were according to the divine good pleasure. Behold, my child, the example which you must follow, if you desire to be a true disciple of my heart. If you look well into your heart, you shall find it divided, as it were, into two parts, each of which is anxious to sway it. One of these, a sensual propensity, is called the inferior, the other, a rational inclination, the superior part. The former is especially vitiated by original sin, the latter is still guided by a supernal ray. With the first, the spirit of evil is wont to harmonize, the good spirit, on the other hand, espouses the cause of the second. The inferior part struggles to extend its sway over the whole heart, and maintain it, by means of pride and self-love, the leaders of all other vices. The superior part, through humility and charity, which preside over the whole host of virtues, desires, with perfect justice, to rule, to conquer, and subdue, as its foe, the part opposed. These two parts, my child, are the two domestic enemies that hardly ever cease to war against each other, whose aims are opposite, that can be put down and subjugated, but never destroyed or exterminated. The superior part, through the divine favor, by the freedom of its will, possesses such strength that not only the inferior part, but the whole world, and all hell united, cannot force it to a surrender. Therefore, the inferior part, together with the evil spirit, endeavors, by every possible means, to encompass, to disturb, to deceive, to worry the same. It tries every artifice, at one time, violence, at another, caresses, now perverseness, then, uprightness. Sometimes it shows itself an enemy, at others, a friend. Unless you do carefully attend, you will hardly be able to distinguish between them. Yet, it is necessary to know them distinctly. For on this discernment depends the right governing of the heart. By it, illusions are avoided, vain fears are made to disappear, inward peace is preserved and retained, even amid the greatest afflictions. The more one part is mortified and subdued, the more the other is made to live and triumph. The first thing, therefore, to be deadened in your heart, is that inferior part, the inordinate craving of nature, which is also called selfishness, or the spirit of nature. Against this, you must never cease to fight. If, at any time, this enemy, frightened by your bravery, be put to flight, or forced to conceal himself, until a more favorable opportunity presents itself, you must diligently seek him out, and, when found, strike him down with fresh ardor. You will know him by this mark, that he ever aims immoderately at what is either too high or too low, being ever carried off by an inordinate liking or dislike, beyond the order which divine providence has established. On the one hand, proud and wandering beyond his sphere, and relying on his own powers, he would fain search and look into the unsearchable counsels of the deity, and, although he does not fully comprehend anything of what is beneath him, yet he would measure, by his own dullness and imbecility, the wisdom, power, and other perfections of God, which, in their very nature, are incomprehensible. He struggles against admitting what he does not both see and love. He is ashamed and unwilling to own that he has made mistakes. If it is proved, he grows stubborn, he seeks to be prominent, he shrinks from the thought of being surpassed, or brought under, in anything. He takes for granted that he can do everything. If he has brought something to a prosperous issue, he is wonderfully self-pleased, and boasts, as if he had performed a miracle. Has he done anything unsuccessfully? He murmurs, excuses himself, or throws the blame upon others. He is not concerned about what he is in reality, but about what he may appear to be before others. He seeks to be esteemed. He is anxious that others should speak of him. He longs to possess the affection of men. He gained enough if he is praised. If no one praises him, he himself makes up the deficiency. In himself, he either sees no faults, or he disguises them. In his neighbor, he descries them everywhere. He is prone to despise others, to suspect many things, and to twist them into evil. Hence, on the other hand, he is ever inclined to what is low, what pleases the flesh, what flatters the senses, what savors of the world. He loves, he relishes. He judges matters according to his own propensity, not according to the reality of the things themselves. As he has himself for an end, he seeks in everything his own convenience or pleasure. He even endeavors betimes to adapt things divine to himself. For he undertakes occasionally to serve me, whilst he desires to gratify himself. Wherefore, he easily gives admittance to the angel of darkness, who, taking the shape of an angel of light, suggests to him many things apparently pious, beautifully thought, tenderly felt, all which increases his pride, and keeps up his self-love. My child, if this spirit of nature triumphs over the heart, it affects the ruin of the heart. It behooves you, therefore, to deaden this part of the heart, by resisting it, by going countering it, and by unceasingly repressing the same, as long as it remains vitiated, or ill-ordered. Do not think this hard, my child. It is incomparably more easy and pleasant to subdue the same, and govern it, when subdued, than to be ruled and tormented. But, since natural reason cannot, by itself, attain to a supernatural end, you must likewise, by mortification, purify and elevate the superior part of the heart. For, if you act from natural reason alone, you can then gather no merit for life everlasting, nor will you be called a disciple of my heart. You must, then, mortify the whole heart, and subject it to grace, so that, in all things, it obeys the divine good pleasure. In thoughts, in words, in deeds, in sufferings, you should be moved by divine grace, guided by a supernatural reason, directed to me as your end. Nowhere suffer yourself to be hurried into any act by the mere motion or impulse of nature, but follow grace, act according to my spirit. Use the powers of nature, not as causes or principles, but as means, or instruments, for things supernatural. This mortification of the heart, which is the rule of the interior life, and the spirit of the saints, is that a more useful and necessary mortification, whereby the roots of vices are plucked up, the dangers of temptations avoided, the very causes of inward troubles removed. This holy mortification is to be practiced, not with fretfulness, harshness, or anxiety, but with a tranquil and generous heart. Now, my child, in your heart, there are things so great and numerous to be mortified, and they lie so hidden from you, that, unless enlightened by grace, you could not so much as see them, and when you see them, unless strengthened by grace, you might be overpowered by the sight of them. Wherefore, you must have recourse to prayer, without intermission, that you may obtain light and strength from above. Then will I, knowing that, as yet, you are unable to bear the knowledge of all the imperfections of your heart, so gently order things, that you may know and overcome them by degrees, since I will proportion the grace of strength to the grace of light. And you, my child, must unremittingly be on thy guard, lest you shut your eyes to this light, sent from above, or neglect to cooperate with this heaven-given strength. For this might be the beginning of your downfall. Be faithful, allow yourself to be led by grace in all, and to all, and you will experience such things as the saints have experienced, whereby you will doubtless come to my heart, and God shall be exalted, and you shall be made holy. The more perfectly, the more closely, you shall become assimilated to my heart. Behold, my child, the Magi had come from the east, and, entering the cave, they found me, an infant, with Mary, my virgin mother. Observe my heart, and imitate its disposition. Such as it was, in the presence of my own, such it is, before strangers, as it was, before shepherds of the lowest estate, so it is before Magi, of the highest rank. I was not ashamed of the lowliness of my birth, the obscurity of my condition, the practice of every virtue. In this, my heart does not regard the judgments of men, but, setting aside human respect, it pursues the things that please my Father. Happy he that imitates this fortitude of my heart, that, with his heart undaunted, overcomes human respect. For as my heavenly Father confessed me, because I confessed him, so, whoever shall confess me before men, him also will I confess before my Father. But woe to him that shall be ashamed before men, of me, of my teaching, of my example. Of him will I also be ashamed, before my Father, the angels, and men themselves, when I shall come in majesty, to judge. What do you fear, O man? Does not reason itself tell you that honor is due to virtue, dishonor to vice? Why then, do you dread to practice virtue, as if you thought it a disgrace? Behold, beside God, none witness your actions, except angels and men. Now, pray then, which of these should you mind? The good angels, if you boldly vow yourself my servant, will joyfully extol your greatness of soul, and pray for the continuance of your fortitude. And men, as well as the saints in heaven, as the wise and good upon earth, feeling similarly disposed in your regard, will act in like manner. The reprobate angels, and foolish, and wicked men, will admire you, at least inwardly, in spite of themselves, although outwardly they speak against you, to hide their own faint-heartedness and cowardice. Why should you heed the false judgments and idle talk of these? In doing so, would you not be reckoned among these, and become a partaker of their lot? Were all men to talk about you, would you be different from what you are? You are just what you are, before me, my child, and the tongues of all creatures cannot make you greater or smaller. Who is he that can be pleasing to all? None, neither could I myself obtain this. Do not, then, attempt what is impossible. Strive to please me, as much as you are able, and, in this holy endeavor, care not for what the world may think concerning you. If you are still guided by a regard for men, it is plain that you have not yet learned humility and charity of my heart. Whoever is humble of heart, and impelled by divine love, desires not to please men, nor fears, if he were to displease them, when he cannot otherwise satisfy me. Neither stands he in dread of the judgments and scoffs of the world, but he keeps his countenance, and goes his way, and, if my honor requires it, he utters his opinion, with a holy freedom. He does nothing that he may be seen, he omits nothing through fear of being seen. He cares not whether he be praised or blamed by a foolish world, whether he be esteemed much or little. The world is for him, as if it were not. Me alone he has in view, since he knows that to me everything is due. To me, he loves to refer all, by whom alone he can and will be approved, and rewarded, as he deserves. But it is no wonder that whoever gratifies pride and self-love becomes the slave of human respect. For surely none is more a slave than he that is swayed by human respect, since he has as many masters as he sees men. Meanwhile, such a one will do nothing worthy of me, worthy of his own perfection. My child, wherever you may be, whether living in the world, or secluded from the world, beware of human respect. This vice is met everywhere, not only among people of the world, but even among religious from the world. It enters into the sanctuary, and there it stands an abomination, in the Holy of Holies. Many, deceiving themselves, under the resemblance of charity, or prudence, yield to human respect, and were they to look properly into themselves, they would discover that it is not the virtue of charity or prudence, but the veil of timid pride and self-love. Sometimes, my child, it is not expedient, rashly, to expose piety, but never, and nowhere is it allowed, to betray piety. In the practice of virtue, it is a sure and safe rule, to consider not one's own, but the divine honor, not to neglect the open profession of virtue, simply to avoid your own confusion, but to omit its open profession, when my honor or glory might suffer, in consequence. In general, my child, in whatever place you may be, if, inasmuch as this rule allows, you begin at once openly to practice virtue, it will not only give me great honor, but also prove very advantageous to yourself. For thus the good and the wicked, as well as the fervent and the lukewarm, shall know you. The first will seek your company, and sustain you, the last will leave you alone, and not ensnare you. If any there be, who do find fault with your conscientiously free, and noble-souled deportment, be not, therefore, troubled, or cast down, but call to mind, that if, to those injury of your conscience, you did still seek to please men, you should not be the servant of God, nor a disciple of my heart. Besides, what would it avail, to be blamed by none, and to be pleasing to all? Could you in the end, be defended by mortal man, when I will be your judge? Or could you be saved, while I condemn you? What will be the feelings, after death, before me, their judge, of those cowardly souls, that, through human respect, placed during life, the opinions of a foolish world before my judgments, and betrayed my cause? Alas! How many reprobates has human respect made, whose lot, had they spurned it, should now be among the saints? Believe me, child, it is every way better to regard my judgments, rather than those of men. If you are pleasing to me, that is enough for you. To please men alone is simple vanity, mere mockery. Cheer up thy courage, my child, look down upon the false sayings of men, that fly through the air, and only reach those who grasp them for themselves. If you do once fully learn to raise yourself above every human respect, you will hardly be again annoyed by it, and, yourself consistent, you will pity the madness of the world, and the silliness of men, who suffer themselves, in so slavish a manner, to be dragged to destruction. And when you have come to this, that you are no longer moved by any human respect, then, freed from a very great hindrance to salvation and perfection, you shall safely advance in the way of virtue. My child, when the days were accomplished, that they should present me to the Lord, I offered myself, and all I had, to my heavenly Father, with a pure desire of pleasing Him. Although, at my incarnation, I had forever consecrated myself, and my whole life, to my Father, yet, I never omitted to dedicate to Him every particular action of my life, and keep in view His good pleasure. But, since a good intention is a matter of such importance in the interior life, that no one can be a true disciple of my heart without it, my heart did not cease to show, teach, inculcate this by its example. Look at my life, from its beginning unto the end. Did my heart anywhere please itself? Did it seek the glory of the world? In all my life, child, can be found no act arising from the mere impulse of human nature, none from mere custom, none from mere necessity, none, finally, whether great or small, which did not spring from the motive of fulfilling the divine will, of pleasing the divine majesty. How happy is he that has put on this sentiment of my heart! He is ever useful to himself, ever dear to me, his Savior God. What is that which is acceptable to me? The inward affection, rather than the outward act, the intentions of the heart, rather than the fulfillment of the work. What do I reward forever? The fruit of grace, whereby you are moved to act, and wherewith you cooperate, not the effect of nature, whereby you are stirred up, or which you follow. My grace moves the will to do whatever things are by me, directly or indirectly, commanded or desired. These I wish to be so done, that they be supernaturally good and meritorious, wherefore, to do them, I give an actual grace, without which they could not be supernaturally good and meritorious. If, then, you are induced to act, by my will or good pleasure, know that you are moved by grace, a supernatural principle. But the end or intention of your will forms the species of the act. Such as is your intention, such will be the act that follows. If you have a right intention, you will, before and above all, intend and seek my good pleasure, me, your end and supreme good. It sometimes happens that the primary intention of all action is right, but that a wrong secondary intention creeps in. When this occurs, the goodness of the action, indeed, is not wholly destroyed, but is lessened in part, and the actor becomes guilty of so much as there has been of ill-regulated, or evil will, in the vitiated intention. Behold, my child, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, therefore, all things must be derived from me, be referred to me. If, then, you would be blamed when you do not refer them to me, how much more so, if you turn them aside to yourself, or to my enemy, the world? A precious thing, a wonderful virtue, my child, is a right intention, whereby actions, although natural, and indifferent in themselves, when done by means of grace, become supernatural and meritorious. A marvelous secret, whereby lead, and brass, and other metals, are changed into pure gold. Beware, however, lest thou fall into the quite common delusion, which makes men fancy that, by substituting a good intention, they can render meritorious a work or action, undertaken, not by grace, or by my will, but from the sole motive of nature, aversion, or inclination, or from self-will alone. Follow then, with a right aim, everything begun, according to my good pleasure. Of what avail is a work, how great or praiseworthy however it may outwardly appear, to him that does it, without a right intention? On the other hand, that which is done with a pure intention, however little and lowly it may seem, becomes excellent, and altogether beneficial. Would that men knew, and practiced, this art of acting rightly! How easily could they merit a bright crown in heaven! There are those who work much, and gain little, who busy themselves about everything, to attempt many, and various things, but, in the end, find themselves with almost empty hands, because, like irrational creatures, they act without an end, or pursue an end ill-ordered, and unworthy. How many there are, who exchange the fruit of their labors, for an empty breath of praise or admiration, wherewith they ever long to feed their weary and hungry heart. Behold, how many there are, who make so much of the smoke of vainglory, that they buy it at a price, by which they might purchase for themselves the kingdom of endless glory. Is there not an endless number of such madmen? Take heed, my child, lest you be reckoned among them. There are others, who appear to be doing little, and yet deserve to become very holy. These are they, who think that he does enough, who does the will of God. My child, when you devote yourself to me, in exercises of piety, you must place, even above these practices themselves, the intention of doing my good pleasure. Thus, whether you feel consolation or desolation, you shall remain calm, gather certain fruit, and honor me. If you are engaged in works of duty or charity toward your neighbor, let me be the end of those works, for thus it will happen that you shall never fail of your reward, and that you shall lose nothing of your peace, whether your neighbor be or be not improved. If you have in view no other object except my sole good pleasure, you shall be content and happy in every event, because you know that I do not demand of you, and will not crown in you, for nothing, except your good, efficacious will, and that success depends upon me, who orders all things according to infinite wisdom. By means of a pure intention, you are enabled to remain undisturbed and tranquil amid hardships, distresses, even amid temptations themselves, for, since purity of intention raises you before me above sensible things, you need not be annoyed by what you feel against your will. Finally, my child, whether you are in action or at rest, whether you labor or divert yourself, whether you are watching or sleeping, whether you eat or drink, whether, in short, you are doing anything else, do all things to follow my good pleasure, to be acceptable to me, and, behold, a great and ever-increasing amount of merits will be given to you. In the morning, you must daily make a general intention, whereby everything to be done or suffered during that day is directed to this last end, that, for love of me, you may accomplish my will, and thus please me. This good, this holy intention, will give life to all things that follow, and will virtually continue to add vigor to them. It is also of the greatest importance to renew, during the day, your good intention before every action, even more, when it can be done conveniently, to renew the same during the action. But to do all things with the right end, it will be of very great help to foresee occasions of meriting, dangers of losing, virtues to be practiced, snares of pride and self-love to be avoided. One and the same action may be directed to several indifferent, proximate ends, which, directly or indirectly, tends to the salvation of your own soul, or of your neighbor, or to my honor. Hence, you may acquire a great treasure of merits, of which they, who act with no aim of this kind, are deprived. Moreover, every action may be made up of several virtues, as you practice as many virtues as you intend, and as to every act of virtue corresponds a new degree of present grace and future glory. It is easy to see how important a matter is this holy intention. But, my child, you must take care that these things be not done with anxiety, with injury to inward freedom, or with the loss of peace, for, so far from being useful, they would, on the contrary, be hurtful. Remember, lastly, that, inspired by the spirit of the same intention that animated me, you ought to unite all your actions and sufferings with mine, if, as a disciple of my heart, you are desirous of acting in a manner worthy of so high a vocation. My child, vain self-love is so subtle that it can easily assume any shape and thrust itself into all things. Hence it will happen that, unless you be cautious, you may be animated and led by that spirit of self, rather than by my own. Nor does human light or prudence suffice to distinguish this, since neither can, of itself, discern things supernatural, but a light from above, and a divine assistance, are needed. Wherefore, you must pray without ceasing, that you may be enlightened from heaven, and beg fervently, that you may be helped by grace, whereby you are enabled to tend, rightly, and singly, above all things to me. Be bold, my child. King Herod sought me, a child, that he might put me to death. But Joseph, warned by an angel, took me and my mother, by night, and retired into Egypt. The unseasonable hour of the night, my tender age, the condition of my parents, the abandoning of my native land, the dwelling in a foreign country, the tarrying among infidels, whose manners were contrary to mine, the poverty and obscureness of my life, drudgery and hardship, everything in fine, was suited to render the heart cheerless. Yet, amid all this, my heart remained so free, that neither time, nor place, nor men, nor any created objects whatsoever, could render it captive. My child, strive, by every means in your power, to imitate this holy freedom of my heart. My heart, elevated above the reach of all else, was restrained by the good pleasure of my Father alone. So also should your heart, raised above all created objects, be held by the divine will alone. The greatest freedom to which the heart of man can aspire is this: to be dependent upon no one except its God. This is that true, that perfect liberty, whereby man is nobly exalted and elevated above his very superiors, through whom, as the organs of God, he is pleased to have my will made known. Whoever possesses this freedom is raised above every created power, above all the whims and fickleness of men, above all the casual events of times, places, and circumstances, insomuch that, unless he betray himself, he can be enslaved by no created object. But none can gain this privilege unless he wholly devotes to me his heart, disengaged from every creature. For, so long as you inordinately desire, or fear anything, so long will your heart be fettered and embarrassed. Your heart will be a slave, so long as it follows its natural inclination, in either direction, or seeks in anything, even in what is good, itself, as a sin. There are those who, released from sin and the world, endeavor to be also released from themselves, that they may freely live for me, who yet sigh in my service, as under a heavy yoke, because they suffer themselves to be ensnared by a delusion, whereby they fancy me a troublesome ruler, or a harsh master, ever bent on discovering something to punish. These, assuredly, do me great injustice, deter their neighbors from my service, and render themselves wretched to no purpose. Am I not a father? Where is there a father's heart like mine? Who then is so much a father as I am? A father infinitely wise, who knows everything, what is useful, what is hurtful, to my children, infinitely powerful, against whose will no enemies, whether visible or invisible, can do the least harm to my children, infinitely good, who love my children, with a heart burning with a divine love, and longs to turn all things, evil, as well as good, to their advantage. Therefore, show in my service, that you are the worthy child of such a father, and do not, by a most unseemly crime, conduct yourself as the servant of an overbearing master. Keep the goodwill of shunning whatever you know is displeasing, and of doing whatsoever you understand is agreeable to me, and then expand your heart, not, indeed, to the false freedom, the hard yoke of the children of the world, but to the true freedom, the sweet privilege of the children of my heart. This do I love, that my children enjoy holy freedom, and I consider myself greatly honored thereby. Use, therefore, a becoming diligence, to please me, and be not anxious to know whether in reality you are pleasing to me, but, setting aside all subtlety of the understanding, and all uneasiness of the will, throw yourself with confidence on my heart. It cannot be otherwise than that, so far from being offended, I will rather be delighted with this freedom of heart, inspired by a pure and generous love. Under my guidance, under my protection, under my divine care, be free from all inordinateness, neither excessively fear hell, the world, nor yourself. For although, of yourself, you are able to do nothing, you can do much in me, in whom you believe, in whom you hope, whom you love. If, at any time you fall into faults, do not conduct yourself like a menial servant, who, full of alarm, stands in dread of stripes, and is desirous either of running away, or of cowardly hiding himself, but act like a child that loves his father, and forthwith endeavors to make up for his guilt, who runs to his father with so much the more freedom, the greater the goodness which he knows him to possess. As often, therefore, as you sadly fall, do you return to me, in a childlike manner, ask forgiveness, and renew your resolve of being faithful, nor suffer the peace of your heart to be disturbed, or your freedom lessened. Neither should the means of perfection fetter your heart, for even these, if they took away the holy freedom of your heart, would be obstacles rather than means. Wherefore, so soon as I make known to you my will, you must freely overlook everything else, and be solely dependent on my bidding. Take heed, however, my child, lest, under pretense of a holy freedom, you indulge the fickleness of the heart, as they do, who allow themselves to be guided by feeling, not by principle. To them, that which a little before was pleasing, now becomes irksome. In the glow of fervor, they assume spiritual practices, and soon afterwards, leave them off again, or perform them with distaste. They live now in one way, and, in a short time, wearied, they try another. Now, they mortify themselves severely, as if they were wholly spiritual, and, soon again, having become really sensual, they flatter nature. This, surely, is not to be a child of freedom, but the sport of fickleness, the slave of feeling. My child, be more steadfast in regard to your freedom. If you are busy with any employments, do not give yourself up to them, merely lend yourself to them, lest, instead of yourself being their master, they rule you. As often as you feel yourself impelled by nature, either to undertake, or to perform something, do forthwith check your ardor, otherwise you shall soon perceive that your heart is being fettered, and that the matter itself is less rightly done. Let no place on earth hold your heart bound to itself. Keep it free everywhere, knowing that I, your God, am found in all places, that my children are everywhere cherished by my Spirit. Finally, that where my Spirit is, there is true freedom. Wherever, therefore, you may be master of yourself, in all things, whether internal or external, whether spiritual or temporal, whether lofty or lowly. Keep your heart free, united above everything with the divine will. My child, you should so cherish and guard the freedom of your heart, that no one, neither your inferior, nor an equal, nor even your superior, can take it away. Wherefore, you ought to judge of nothing, nor strive after it, according to the resemblance of things, the opinion of men, or your own feeling. In all things, let the standard of your judgment be the truth, which you will find by examining how my heart has judged them, and let my will be the rule of your desiring. This truth will free you, and you shall be free. Indeed, this divine will shall guide you and keep you free. The more glorious this holy freedom of heart is to me, the more useful to yourself and to your neighbor. With the more care is it to be fostered, the more resolutely is it to be defended against your foes. Beside the demon in the world, nature will also frequently rise up against it. Pride, with many reasoning, and self-love, in various ways, will prey upon it, to cause it to yield, at least, in some or other matter. But you will frustrate and overcome the assaults and stratagems of your enemies, if you boldly counter to what these foes suggest, and if you simply follow my will. Whoever wills everything according to my divine good pleasure, whoever lives by this, and seeks his happiness there, enjoys a true and holy freedom, which I desire every disciple of my heart to possess, and which neither hell, nor the world, nor any creature can take away. Attend, my child, and see how solicitous my heart was, that, in public as well as in private, it might teach, by example, the ways of salvation and perfection. From my childhood, I was wont, not only frequently to pray alone, but also to go up to Jerusalem, and to pray publicly in the temple, and this according to custom. My child, what was my whole life, if not a prayer, from which my heart never ceased, with which it was always and everywhere occupied? Where did Mary, my mother, and Joseph find me when I was lost, if not in the temple, the house of prayer? Where my disciples and friends, except returning from prayer, with my heart still praying. Where, in fine, my enemies, except praying in the solitude of Gethsemane. Examine carefully, every day of my life, behold. The very dawn found me at prayer, and, even at that time, sanctifying the labors of the day. When the toils of day were over, when all nature was at rest, the darkness of the night beheld me praying, and pouring forth my heart, before my Father, with the angels alone as my witnesses. But, even amidst the very labors of the day, how often did I withdraw a little from the multitude? How often, whilst in the midst of the multitude, and during my labors, did I raise my heart to my Father? My child, with special care and diligence, to acquire the spirit of prayer, this holy habit of praying. All the saints, and followers of the saints, all the disciples of my heart, learned this holy and sanctifying use of prayer. They prayed at stated times, not merely with their lips, but also with their mind and heart. Again, wherever they were, under every circumstance of fortune, they had inwardly recourse to me, by prayer, making known to my heart their joy and gratefulness, amid prosperity, imploring my help and comfort, in adversity, asking counsel, in their doubts. So should you also do, my child, if you will aspire to holiness, if you are desirous of securing your salvation. Meditate devoutly, every day. But beware, lest your meditation prove amusing, rather than a prayer, a pious study, rather than a divine intercourse. Let the mind reason and reflect, as much as is necessary, but let the heart elicit acts, sometimes of faith, hope, charity, sometimes of sorrow, humility, self-denial, again, of fortitude, of good and firm resolve, again, of thanksgiving, of joy and exultation of heart, with the angels and saints, now a resignation, of conformity, to the divine will, of pure love, reposing in God's good pleasure, or of any other virtue whatsoever. Then let it fervently petition much for itself, and also for others, for the Church and her ministers, for the perfection of the saints, dwelling on earth, for the perseverance of the just, for the conversion of all sinners, heretics, and infidels. In proportion as you advance in the interior life, and attain to a more perfect degree, in the same, you should shorten your reasonings, and give freer scope to the affections, so that you treat me in your heart, by means of acts and petitions, and, at last, by the mere occupation of divine union. Meditate and pray in this manner, my child, and remember that, whether you pray orally or mentally, the heart must be foremost, in order that every prayer and supplication may be performed in an attentive and devout manner. Although you may not be able to pray as well as you desire, do not think little of your prayer, or neglect it. I myself do neither deem it of little importance, nor do I overlook it. Do with a good will whatever you are able, by so doing. Be convinced that you pray well and meritoriously, and that you will make progress in virtue, as well as in prayer. Almost everything, then, depends on prayer. Without prayer, evil things find no remedy, good things become dangerous, but to him who prays, both good and evil will prove advantageous. Nowhere, my child, except in prayer, will you acquire true knowledge of me, and of yourself. Therefore, without prayer, you will never attain to true humility and charity. Without prayer, you will never fully understand my heart, nor possess its spirit. Without prayer, you will in many things not seize the sentiments of my heart, and, what is more dangerous, you will measure my heart by your own. If in your concerns you have recourse to prayer, it will not rarely happen that you judge differently of them from what you did before, because the light of divine grace, which is wont to be poured into the soul during prayer, is infinitely purer than the light of human reason. What you did think to have sprung from grace, you shall often find to be the offspring of nature. What you did fancy a virtue, you shall sometimes perceive to be self-love, what you did judge to be for my greater glory, you shall often understand to be the effect of your hidden pride. Let it not be sufficient for you to pray at certain times, for it behooves you to pray always, and not to grow faint. Behold my sweet command, according to which you can approach me at all times, and, as a child, converse with me. Everywhere there are obstacles, within and without, temptations from every side, both open and secret, always dangers, lest the crown promised to perseverance be lost. Exceedingly necessary, therefore, is grace, which, however, is not wont to be given, in a special manner, except to them that pray. The interior man, amid his troubles, has first recourse to me, and begs for help, therefore, he is relieved, and obtains frequently extraordinary favors, whereas, he that has first recourse to human means, so far from being disburdened, increases his difficulties, until, entering into himself, he comes to me, without whose aid human endeavors are of no avail, to the suffering heart. My child, if you come to my heart, whenever you are in affliction, there will be no need to look for human consolations, you shall find one drop of my consolation, sweeter and more effectual than all the flood of men's consoling words. If, at times, for my honor and for your advantage, I give you no sensible consolation to taste, you shall still always find true comfort in my heart, both by resigning yourself to my good pleasure, and by receiving my assistance. This holy resignation, although, on the one hand, it is contrary to the feelings, and, therefore, bitter, yet, on the other, by means of grace, becomes so sweet, in spite of the feelings, that no one, unless he has experienced it, can fully understand the same. When the man of prayer is tempted, he becomes more united with me, he is not cast down, but raised, he is not saddened, but cheered up, he is not shaken, but rendered more firm. If, at any time, you are overtaken by the storm, or even wrapped up in its thick darkness, turn yourself to me, who is always present, and, with your heart, cling to me confidingly, you shall be secure, amid the very rage and gloom of the tempest, and, sometimes, you shall be illumined with a ray, of softest light from above, that thereby you may see, that what you thought certain destruction, was, either a mere nothing, or even an advantage. When you are desirous of saying or doing something, and a doubt or perplexity presents itself, whether or not it be lawful, entering into yourself, hearken to my spirit, and if, by having frequently recourse to me, you have learned to distinguish my whisperings, you will perceive a clear decision, which you may follow, with safety. A soul accustomed to have recourse to me, has everywhere with her, a protector, a counselor and comforter, whom, not only when she is alone, but also, whilst dealing with her neighbor, she knows, and loves to call upon in her heart, to console, and to entertain. After this you strive, my child, for this, do you leave nothing undone, that you may acquire this pious habit of having recourse to my heart, of tending towards me as your center, of busying yourself inwardly with me, of dealing with me by means of prayer. This is that spirit of prayer, which, if you secure it for yourself, will lovingly entertain you in solitude, will guard you in public, will solace you in adversity, will check you in prosperity, will protect you in dangers, and, everywhere at your service, will guide you to holiness. First of all, my child, you ought frequently to beg for the gift of prayer, of all gifts the best, which embraces every gift, by prayer, as other things, so, especially, is the gift of prayer obtained. Next, it is a good counsel, well suited, to acquire for yourself the habit of prayer, as much as possible, so to arrange your occupations, that no long interval ever intervene, during which you do not for some time, or at least for a few moments, confer with me, by means of some spiritual practice. Then, you must make use of both inward and outward temptations and troubles, as of so many warnings, to turn yourself to me, for the sake of evincing your love, imploring grace, and renewing your resolve of being faithful. Lastly, you should persist in your repeated efforts, until you are accustomed to make use of prayer, until you have recourse to me, under every circumstance, like a child to its parent, not by the power of reason and reflection, but by a spontaneous instinct. Cheer up, my child, spare neither care nor diligence, to acquire the science of the elect, this object of the longing of all the disciples of my heart. It is worth all that, and more. In prayer, you have a support in your wants, amends for your shortcomings, means for progress, a safe hope of perseverance, whatsoever it is profitable to possess. Prayer is the refreshment of them that hunger and thirst after justice. Prayer is the delight of pure souls. Prayer, to sum up all, is the employment of the saints, and their repose as well. When you pray, you honor and glorify me. You perform that upon earth, which the angels and saints are doing in heaven, and which must be your blissful occupation throughout the joyous eternity.